Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Susan Catlett. I am a board certified behavior analyst, doctoral level, a licensed behavior analyst in Texas. And all that really means is that I love behavior. I particularly love working with children who have autism spectrum disorders. This is my well, let's just say I've been doing it a long time. This I'm over 30 years of working with kids with autism, and I started learning about autism many, many years ago when it was very much less common, as I'm sure you have learned. And I started working with families in their homes. So that is how I got my start and my interest in love and experience and intrigue and all of that about autism. So thank you to you all as parents for welcoming your homes to so many of us who have learned. Today I'm going to talk about behavior. And I ask that in behavior world or in behavior analysis, we think of behavior as anything that you can see or measure, or anything you can see and count, basically. So when we talk about behavior, you might be here to learn more about the kicking, screaming, hitting, pinching, biting kinds of behavior. And what I'm here to talk about is all behavior and why they happen. And so behavior is really anything: taking a drink of water, eating a chip, sitting at a table, dancing, eliminating in the toilet, writing, skating, anything you can see and measure. And again, I'm very glad that you have found Family to Family. I've been a friend of Family to Family for many, many years. Back in 2000, I was associated with a grant who did a lot of work with Eve Cugini and Family to Family. So I'm really thrilled to be here. So basically a little bit more just to tell you, and then we'll start talking about behavior. I am a self-employed consultant. I work with school districts. And so I have about, 10 or 12, 14 school districts with whom I work around the Houston area. So every day I'm in a different place. And every day I get to see really great things happening and bring ideas to other places where we want great things to happen. And anyway, that is my love and passion. So we will get started. And I am very guilty of including too many slides and handouts because I always have this fear, even after all this long, that I'm going to stop at in 15 minutes and have nothing else to say. So you have all the information. I did leave a couple of business cards up front at the Family to Family table. I also co-host a podcast called Function Junction Behavior Matters. Julie Blake was a guest last week and this week, talking more about Family to Family and their wonderful things that they do. So today we're going to be talking about why do kids do the things that they do? And I don't want to read to you, but I do want to point out that children never, it doesn't matter the age, really never choose to engage in meltdowns or any anxiety-related behavior in the same way that you would never choose to have a meltdown in front of your family, colleagues, or friends. A meltdown is not by choice. It is a byproduct of a brain that isn't coping with something. And that brain needs to be showered in love, compassion, safety, not punishment, shame, or fear. So in behavior world, we are always trying to identify why the behavior happens. So whenever someone engages in a behavior, whether it's a behavior you want or don't want, the question that we always ask, that you always ask to your friends and family and husband and wife is, why is he doing that? And that's the start. Because behavior occurs for one of 4 reasons, and I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. I'm pressing the wrong button. So I found this years ago that a father had created about the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. And oftentimes when I go into a classroom, I'll say, okay, tell me what behavior you're concerned about. And they'll say, well, he just has tantrums. And I'll say, okay, tell me more. Well, he just loses it. Okay, tell me more. Well, he scratches. Okay. That's a behavior I can see and count. So does he scratch with his right hand or his left hand? Usually his right hand. Okay. Yesterday we were looking at a little boy in terms of intensity of behavior and looking at scratching. And the question was, does he scratch and attempt to scratch? Does he scratch and make contact? Or does he scratch and draw blood? Because those are 3 really different levels of intensity and 3 different things to look at, right? So when I really love this determination or the distinction between a tantrum and a meltdown. And when I think of tantrums, I think about 2- and 3-year-olds who are in the grocery store who say, Mommy, Skittles. And Mommy goes, no, honey, no Skittles today. And child goes, Mommy, Skittles. And mom says, no, not today. And so mom is embarrassed, and the checkout lady is waiting for her, and the people behind her are staring, and the little kid is screaming and crying, real tears. It's not coming down their face. I want candy. And so when you think about that, that really is a tantrum, right? So it's want directed. He wants the Skittles. It's there's a goal. There's control. I want to get those Skittles regardless of what I have to do here, because I don't care. There's an audience, right? There's the checkout lady. There's mom. There's the people waiting. There is checking of engagement. He's looking to see if mommy's going to reach for the Skittles, or she. There's protective mechanisms, and it's resolved if the goal is accomplished. And a lot of times, as much as I want to say, no, don't do it, a lot of times parents will give in because they want this all to stop so they can check out and go do what they need to do. So we call that a tantrum, and we look at that as really something that occurs in younger children, sort of 1 to 5 years old. When you think about a meltdown, we're looking at a reaction from being overstressed and overwhelmed from the environment. And when we talk about the environment, we're not talking about just the sights, sounds, and smells. We're talking about the things in the environment, the people in the environment. Is there someone new? Is there someone who I expect to be here and who is not here? Is that it's a reactive mechanism. Sometimes we go through life and we have a lot going on, and we have COVID, and we're coming out of COVID, and we have all of the stress of life. And then all of a sudden, you're walking down the street, and there's a small step. And that small step causes us to just lose it. Well, it had nothing to do with the small step. It had to do with all of the stuff that we carry on around us. So think about if you are a child who has autism, and they are walking around every day, all day long, with a large burden, right? A large burden. And I've seen it happen all the times in classrooms. The child will be writing their name with a pencil, and they get a letter wrong. And so they erase it and erase it and erase it, and then there's a hole in their paper. And then they have this whole big meltdown about the hole in the paper. And we say, as parents and adults, it's okay, it's just a hole, I have another piece. It's not about the hole in the paper. It's about that one thing that just put me over the edge. So when we're looking at meltdowns, we're looking at behaviors that continue without attention. A lot of times safety might be compromised. They might be upset. They might throw things. They might want to run out and leave the classroom. They might leave your home. It's often followed by fatigue. That's not goal dependent. It has nothing really to do with the pencil and the eraser and the paper being torn. And they might require assistance to gain control. And in the world of autism, these things happen through adulthood. And I'm fortunate enough to be old. And I've worked with a lot of people who I've stayed in contact with. And I'll never forget my friend Chris. When Chris was in 4th grade, the writing prompt in the classroom was to write about your favorite TV show. And he was like, define favorite. And everybody said, well, Chris, what TV show do you like the most? And he said, define like the most. And so here we are, and they're getting ready for star testing. It is the season. And so somebody really smart said, and it wasn't me, said, Chris, what TV show do you watch the most? And he was like, CSI Miami? Okay, let's write about CSI Miami. And there were 2 things happening there. One is, do you see the difference between love and like the most versus watch the most? Love and like the most is very abstract, right? But like the most is very quantitative. I can easily tell you what I watch the most because it's numbers. So Chris is now in his 30s, and he has been a guest on the podcast twice, he and his mother. And Chris was and is a fascinating young man. He drives. He's not self-employed. He's employed. He was in software sales, and now he does software. He was in software engineering, and now he does software sales, which encourages him to have interactions with people a lot more, which is fantastic. And I said to Chris the last time I talked to him, I remember in 4th grade, and I said, do you remember that writing prompt? And he goes, define favorite. And I was like, yeah, that's the one. And I said, you used to have meltdowns, and I'm curious if you kind of have gotten past that. He said, during COVID, I did have a few meltdowns. Thankfully, the people that I worked with were understanding and knew me and knew that I have autism. And he said, but honestly, since then, it's been a while. And the point I want to make to you is this is a young man in his 30s. he still has meltdowns. And that's okay, right? It's how the environment, remember the people, the setting, the things in the environment respond to that. And the worst thing to do is to try to say, calm down, what's wrong? You're okay, use your words, talk to me, talk to me. And inevitably, because we're your parents and I'm educator, we want help. And so we tend to do things like that. And often the best response is to wait it out, depending on where you are and that you can remain safe. So when we think about a meltdown, we're looking about how to teach about what happened next time at recovery. And so this is a simplified kind of visual of when there's rumbling. Does anybody have a child who that they're getting upset because their face turns red, or they might start scratching themselves or tapping, or they clench their teeth, or they might start wringing their hands, or I have kids who start saying certain words, and we know when we hear certain words, that's about to come. That's the best sign. That's called a precursor behavior. In an behavior world, we love having precursors behavior because that's when we can intervene. And we can do things like, I see you have socks on dogs on your socks. Tell me about those dogs. And just redirect the behavior. Sorry, I'm getting over a sinus infection. So anyway, so if you have a precursor behavior, that's a good thing because that gives us the ability to predict the behavior and stop it before it gets to that point of rage or meltdown where that's really too late to intervene. If you have a child who does not have precursor behaviors, oftentimes when they get to that meltdown stage, the best thing is really honestly to keep them safe. And I have a visual in here that I'll show you about how adults respond to behaviors. When you want to recognize the cues, we kind of talked about that, hiding, going to a quiet place, being stuck, swearing, pacing. We talked about a lot of those. Those are called precursors or things that we want to kind of redirect. I had a little boy in a classroom not too long ago who's a pre-K, 4 years old, and he really wanted to be first in line. And that is always, thank you, I keep getting the visual cue to talk slower. I'm sorry. I know. He always wants to be first in line. So we knew that it was time to transition and that his was going to be second in line and not first because he had been first the day before. And we told him that, we front loaded him, and he still wasn't happy. And so the teacher left with her students, and thankfully I and the paraprofessional were able to stay back and kind of help him through this tragedy of not being in first in line. And he was really mad. And he went through these 5 kind of stages of being really angry, and then you could tell when he was done. And so as he started calming down, his breath got slower, his words were less volume, and at about, I would say, if you think about behavior being from a 1 to a 5, he was kind of back down to a 3 or a 2. And he literally did have dogs on his socks. And I literally said, I have a dog. Do you want to tell me about your dog? And he was like, yes. And I said, okay, well, let's calm down. Let's wipe up that spit that we spit. Let's say sorry to our friend who we hit, the lady, the adult was there. And then we started talking about dogs. And then we talked about how he needed to do whatever he needed to do. He needed to put his shoes back on, and he had his socks on. And then we got his shoes back on, we looked at and talked about dogs for more. And then, we got through that stage, and so we went on down to join his classmates in lunch. But if I had started that when he was at a level 5, I probably wouldn't have made much progress. So, and I'll talk more about that. So recognizing the cues and then teaching kids about triggers. This little guy was only 4 years old, and it's okay to say, I know that you like to be first in line every day, and every day we can't always be first in line. So today, and if you can be second in line without having a meltdown, we can talk about dogs when we get to the next place. So in behavior world, it's all about when then, right? Or first then. Think about it as grandma's rule. Grandma's rule is you first have to do your homework before you can go outside. Or you have to eat your green beans before you can have dessert. That's kind of, I say this in an easy form. That's sort of what my day is about. My day is always about when thens and first thens. It's never about getting things for free. So if a child says they want to listen to music, I go, okay, first sit, write name, and then we'll have music. Or first lock your seatbelt, then I'll turn on the music. I want you to notice that it's never about if then. And a lot of parents and teachers and other educators do things like, well, if you sit in your chair or your seat, you can and lock your seatbelt, then we can have music. And the child will often say, what if I don't, right? So we don't offer a choice unless there is a choice. So it's always first then and when then, never if then. And I've learned that through mistakes. So we also want to teach kids about triggers, and what to do instead of having responding to the trigger. So when someone says you can't have music until you put your seatbelt on, or you can't have be first in line, some ways to resolve that is just to do some deep breathing and to say, okay, teacher, maybe next time. So there's a great resource. If those of you, I didn't ask, how many of you are parents of very young children who have been diagnosed? Okay, thanks. And how many of you have kids who are more maybe elder elementary? Yeah, a few. If you have kids who are a little bit older, you might want to think about zones of regulation. That's a great little strategy that comes with lots of free, they have a free newsletter. You can join zones of regulation and socialthinking.com. Yes, they are wonderful. Michelle Garcia Winter has lots and lots of resources. The reason I like to recommend that to parents is they have free newsletters and free downloadable resources that are wonderful. But zones of regulation and social thinking are great, and this comes from them. And it's just teaching kids how to breathe. When I don't have tools with me, I usually just teach kids to smell the flowers and blow out the candles. Smell the flowers and blow out the candles. And I was with a little guy in PE who was not happy because they weren't playing the game that he wanted to play. And so I just went over and said, I just need you to smell the flowers and blow out the candles. When he was getting triggered, he wasn't already escalated. And it was so cute because later he came back to me and he said, I smelled those flowers and blew out those candles and I feel so much better. I was like, I'm so thankful for that. So teaching about triggers, teaching what to do when we get triggered, because life is made up of things that happen that we're not always happy about. And when we talk about basic science of behavior, remember earlier I said behavior is anything you can see and measure, right? So behaviors continue as long as they're being reinforced. And you might have a kiddo who screams or bites or pinches or what have you, and you think to yourself or say to your spouse or caregiver, I do not reinforce this behavior. Something does. And a lot of times it can be attention. So when a child bites or screams or whatever, we might say, don't do that. Don't bite. No biting. No biting. That is not okay. And even though you're giving negative words, the attention is still really powerful, right? So behaviors only keep occurring if they result in reinforcement. Think about your own behavior. You wouldn't keep going to the same restaurant if the service was horrible, the food was cold, it was overpriced, they always overbilled you. But you would keep going to that favorite restaurant if the food was always good, they were fast, it was reliable, things like that. So our own behavior is reinforced by the environment. What happens in the environment is going to determine whether or not we're likely to engage in that behavior. And then if you're not achieving reinforcement, you wouldn't keep doing it. So again, you might be asking yourself, what on earth is reinforcing eliminating in the toilet instead of, eliminating in the pull-up or the diaper instead of the toilet? And a lot of times the reinforcement can actually be sensory, right? It could feel safe. It could feel better. I've worked with so many children who resist eliminating in the toilet. They'll sit on the toilet, but they'll hold it until that pull-up goes right back on. And something about that sensory experience is reinforcing. Sometimes, and this basic, and I'll show you, explain what this picture is. I laugh at it. It's not, you can't see it, but my friend was talking about her dog, who's a big dog, and he tends to sit on her lap like that and watch TV. And she was telling me how crazy it drives her and everything, and I was like, well, you've reinforced that behavior because he wouldn't be doing it unless he was allowed to do it, right? So this basic principle of behavior applies to all of us, whether the behavior is appropriate or inappropriate. I will say that it does not apply to cats. I have 2 cats. I've always had cats. And I'm sure you're familiar with Pavlov's dog, where he rang the bell and the dog produced saliva. And here's Dr. Pavlov ringing his dog, and the cat is like, yeah, right. And I can tell you, I have 2 dogs and a cat, and I've always had cats. And being a behaviorist, that does not reinforce my behavior. Having dogs does, but being a behaviorist, cats do not reinforce my behavior. So, like I said earlier, anything we think about that we can see and count is considered behavior. So working at the computer, eating, dressing, completing multiplication problems, dancing, using the restroom, these are all behaviors that we want to see more of. And I think as parents, and I'm not a parent, but as parents, I think a lot of parents view behavior as the behaviors we want to stop or happen less frequently, the kicking, hitting, spitting, biting kinds of things. Sorry. So, like I said, think of your own behavior. Why do you keep eating the same meals? You know, I joke about during COVID and our clothes. I don't think I wore pants with buttons until, well into 2021. I had lots of yoga pants though. Why? Because they felt better than pants with buttons, so I'm gonna keep wearing them. The same TV shows. Why do you shop at certain stores, go to certain restaurants? So the key concepts to think about are, and this is where we're going to talk about why behaviors happen. The key concepts to think about are anytime you say to your teacher, your child's teacher, your child's paraprofessional, your husband, your wife, your significant other, anytime you say, why does she do that? What you're really asking is, what is she or he getting from the behavior? And in behavior world, it breaks down very simple. Behaviors occur for 4 possible reasons, okay? It either feels good, it gives automatic sensory reinforcement. So if you have children who do this, or spin, or cluck their tongue, or whatever they do, that might be kind of a motor mannerism or a stereotypic behavior, that feels good. And we all have those feel-good kinds of behaviors. They just don't interfere with learning. I learned during COVID that I had a thing that if I'm in a situation where I'm not feeling really comfortable, or if I'm watching something on TV, I developed this weird little habit where I rub my finger on my thumb, which you wouldn't even notice until I called it out. But you certainly do notice the kid who's out of their seat and waving their arms, or rocking, or spinning, or twirling their hair. And there is some science that tells us that interferes with new learning. So even though it feels good, we want to put parameters on it, right? So I love that you're playing with your hair. First you write your name, and then you can have hair time, things like that. So one reason behavior is it feels good. That's a sensory reinforcement. Another reason that people engage in behavior is because it gets them attention. And again, it doesn't matter if attention is negative attention or positive attention. So in behavior world, we're always looking at is what we're doing making it worse or better? And it all goes down to data. And I'm not going to ask you as parents to collect data, but I am going to ask you to be thinking about, how is my response influencing this behavior? Because if it's not getting better, something is I shouldn't say it that way. If it's not improving the way you want to see it improve, whether you want it to get worse or less frequent or more frequent, we have to change sometimes our behavior. Also, it gets them what they want. The kid in the grocery store who wants the Skittles. He screams, and his takeaway from that is, well, next time we go to H-E-B, forget them. Mommy, I want Skittles, please. We go right to, I want Skittles, because that's what got me the Skittles, right? So we get something we like. It also gets them out of work. A lot of kids engage in behaviors because they don't want to sit on the potty, so they run and hide. Crawl under the bed, go into the backyard, start playing with the dog, do anything other than what it is that you want them to do. So the key to that is going back to when then. When you sit on the potty, I have a goldfish cracker. When it first sit on potty, I have a gummy bear. So it's all about that when then. And then finally, a lot of us engage in behaviors to make certain stimuli, certain environmental stimuli go away. And an easy way to think about this is I am allergic to mosquito bites. So if I get a mosquito bite, I scratch and scratch and scratch to make that itch go away. Or some of us, if we have a headache, we might do this to make the pain go away. Well, a lot of kids, particularly those kids who don't have verbal skills, might engage behaviors to make something internally painful go away that they can't communicate to us. Gastrointestinal issues, tummy aches, headaches, toothaches. We always, when we have a child who's engaging in behaviors that are very concerning, one of the questions we always ask for is, have you ruled out medical? I have kids who I've had, and I don't want to scare anybody, but I've had, I've been doing this a long time, so I've had kids who pulled out their own teeth. And we found out later, battery's running low. We found out later that they had lots of cavities. Well, why? Mom couldn't take him to the dentist because when he was in public, he did things that made it difficult for one person to manage. There's all kinds of reasons. So when you see behaviors that occur frequently and intensively, we always want to rule out things like, is he on a new medication? Did his diet change? And ruling out, is there something internally that we're trying to make go away? So the way to kind of frame that is behaviors occur because they want to get more of something and less of something. They want more of the attention, the skittles, the sensory feedback, or they want to get away from something that is noisy or intrusive to the eyes or tastes horrible or feels bad or the task, the job, right? And a lot of kids don't want to do what they don't want to do and want to do what they want to do. And that's fine. We're all like that. But it's about managing it so that they're always, nothing is free, right? Let's just put it that way. Nothing's free. So as a parent, you always want to have those when, then, and first, then contingencies. If you don't, it gets harder as you grow, as the kiddo gets older. Okay. We're good. So a lot of times in behavior world, we have to really play detective. Because here's what happens. And I work with families and teachers alike. I work more in classrooms than I used to. But we might see a child who is at home and having their favorite things. They've got Elmo, they've got all their favorite things around them. And all of a sudden, they just scream and cry and go to, that level 5 kind of behavior. And we go, what happened? And usually the response is, nothing. He was just playing with all his favorite toys and favorite videos and everything. Something happened. And sometimes the intrusion can be so subtle that it almost takes a detective to figure out the oven just rang, the beeper just went off, or someone opened a door, or someone came home, or someone left, or the light shining through the window is coming at his direction in such a way that he can see the particles in the dust in the room. So although that sounds like, oh my gosh, I could never, we really want to start paying attention to the environment. And if there's some kind of environmental intrusion, I've been the reason for a meltdown before, because I worked with Jesse in his home, I think once a week, and started going into the classroom. And when I got up to the classroom, I would say, hi, Jesse. And he'd go, no, Miss Susan, no, Miss Susan. And he'd crawl under his table. And here I am, like, I swear I work with him at home. His mother's always present. Like, I don't know why this is happening. And for Jesse, he had a feature of autism where certain things belonged in certain places. Same thing with mom and dad. And so when they had class parties, mom and dad they chose it down the road not to go because it made such an impact on Jesse's behavior, because we were in a box and that box was the home box and we were not supposed to be there. So for me, because I had to go, we did a lot of reinforcement and pairing myself with reinforcers, and he loved country music. And so I always had something to do with country music whenever I went to the school so that he would be okay. But that's a really common response, is that you don't belong here. So nothing happened per se, but something happened to their sensory kind of body. So we always want to look like, is there something too loud or too noisy? I had a young man who would go into the cafeteria every day, no problems. And one day the principal came in and had one of those mics that makes a loud noise. And the young man looked at me and automatically, as soon as the noise hit, he came after my throat. And I was like, I wonder if the cafeteria is too noisy. And somebody said, no, he comes here every day. But the principal doesn't come every day with that speaker. And that was the trigger for him. So we have to look at, is there something different? Is somebody absent? What happened on the bus? Was there a different person on the bus? Is he wearing a clothing item that he's not used to? Does he have tags on the back of his clothes that he doesn't like? Or is she wearing something on her head that is uncomfortable? Is there something visually stimulating? Or is there something unexpected? Or is there someone unexpected? So we always have to, we do in classrooms and in homes, we do a lot of front loading. If something's going to be different, we talk about and we show what's going to be different. So a lot of times we use visual cues. And I don't know if anybody here has talked, probably SpeechPath, talked to you about the benefits of visual cues. And to the extent that you can, try to show them what you want to say. We can talk all day long. Oh, it's 6 o'clock tonight. We're going to have a visitor. We're going to have Aunt Susie coming over. Da, 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 da. And a lot of times what kids with autism, particularly younger children hear is blah, 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 blah. Right? So we start sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher. So show what you want to say. And in schools, we have access to all kinds of software programs where in a second we can print out a pretty visual and have it laminated in Velcro. It doesn't have to be pretty. If you don't have a computer or a printer, look at pictures on your phones. You know, first dinner, then movie, or first dinner, then we're going out for ice cream. Show what you want to say. We can use catalogs. We can use the grocery flyers. There's lots of ways. If you have a child who reads, write it down. I can't tell you how many times I work with families and kids in the classroom where I'll just take a Post-it note, or even now, most of the surfaces are wipe off, and so I'll just take like a dry erase pen. First do this, then do this, and it's amazing what it can do to behavior. If you are looking to think about a 5-point scale, teaching kids when you're at a 1, you're good, you're ready to play, you're ready to work, you're ready to take a bath, whatever it is, and a 5 is we're really not at that point. You might even want to think about a 3-point scale for younger children, where it's I'm great, I'm okay, and I'm not good. But there's lots of different ways. I think the key takeaways for me, for you, is when you walk away and you go back into your home, think about how to show what you want to say. We do a lot of visuals in classrooms, and why? Because we know that people with autism are visual and concrete learners. And so anything abstract like your favorite TV show or things like that can be hard for children to interpret. The other walk away for you as a behaviorist is know what your kid likes. And everybody likes things like goldfish crackers. Everybody likes gummy bears, or most people like gummy bears. Lots of people like, you know, whatever it is, a poppet, you know, different sensory things. The question you want to ask yourself is, will he or she work for it? I was in a classroom not too long ago, and the kid's only reinforcer was watching YouTube videos. And in classrooms, those are kind of hard to manage because it's like first work, then YouTube video, then we've got to stop the video and go back to work. And I said, will he does he like anything less cumbersome? Does he like chips or Skittles or whatever? And she said, Para said, yeah, but he won't work for it. And I was like, that's a really good piece of information because I like goldfish crackers and I'm not going to work for them, right? So there's certain things I have to work for. So when we talk about what does your child love, you want to be looking at saving those very favorite items and activities for the very important behaviors and skills that you want to teach them. Eliminating in the potty is a good one. So if they love spicy hot Takis chips, we don't get access to spicy hot Takis chips until we go in the bathroom. And we keep a little container way high up, out of reach but in sight, with those Takis so that they can see when you go in the potty, we get Takis.